All right, every coach is different. We gave Julian Council the opportunity to not have to come into work in studio on the bye week. Instead, he's got his own studio and he's all dressed up looking sharp anyway. Julian, 0-6 start into the bye week. One loss from tying the franchise's worst start of all time. What are your three keys to the remainder of this Carolina Panthers season?
Developing Bryce Young is the first and most important key. And honestly, Nick, that was the top key coming to the season. It's a team game. Yes, you want to win. You want to be competing for a playoff berth. But the development of Bryce Young after giving up what they gave up to get him to get up to number one overall was always the most important thing for the Carolina Panthers. And now that they're 0-6, it would take making history to be a playoff team. And Thomas Brown is entrenched as a play caller here in Carolina. Developing Bryce, that is the most important thing for the Carolina Panthers. And that's really what I'm looking at. What does he look like? Does he look more comfortable in the offense? They talk about going into the Miami Dolphins game that they wanted to find a way to really make him more comfortable. And I thought he did look better in that game. So that's the most important key to me. Second key for me, the rest of the season, is being able to establish some sort of identity on offense. I thought it was the right call for the Panthers to go to Thomas Brown as the play caller. I find it interesting that Frank Reich says that no matter what, this was going to be the decision. I don't believe if they were 6-0, this would be the case. But either way, for the long term and even for the short term, this is the best thing for the Panthers. Thomas Brown, he's going to have his own ups and downs as a new play caller here in the NFL. He's called plays back in college when he was at Miami, but the first time as an NFL play caller. So great opportunity for him. So can he establish some sort of identity? Last year, when Steve Wilks took over, he put down the edict in front of Ben McAdoo that, hey, we're going to run the football. We don't have a good quarterback. We need to run the ball, play ball control football to be able to help our defense. Does Thomas Brown decide that, hey, let's try and run the ball more with Chuba Hubbard. Let's get guys like DJ Chark and Hayden Hurst more involved in this offense. That's my second key. And then the third key is just get healthy on defense. This defense currently is the second worst in the NFL when it comes to points per game. They're allowing 31 points per game. No one thought coming into this year that this was going to be the result for the unit, but also no one thought coming in this year that J.C. Horn, although you guess could have predicted he would likely go down, that he would be out for this amount of time. No one would have predicted that you would have seen Xavier Woods miss this amount of time. Von Bell missed some time as well. Lose Shaq Thompson for the season. So Shaq's not going to come back, but Bell and Woods should be back after the bye. J.C. Horn got a checkup this week with a doctor. We'll see what kind of steps he takes towards coming back. So that should happen soon, hopefully. And if that's the case, I think this defense can play much better than what they played so far. And that, in turn, will help the Carolina Panthers be a more competitive team in the final 11 weeks of the season.
Julian, how hot is Frank Reich's seat after 6 games? I mean, I would have thought you were crazy if you said it was warm at all before the season. But we see the press conferences. We see the way this team plays, especially on offense. And now we see him handing over the keys to the offense to Thomas Brown, a decision he says was 100% his and was the plan all along, but it just doesn't feel that way in the long run.
I don't think his seat is hot right now at 0-6. Now, if this trend of losing continues and the offense looks bad with Thomas Brown, which I don't expect it to, all of a sudden become a great offense. I do think they can make some improvements along the way. But if you don't see the development from Bryce Young over the course of the season moving forward, and if you see the same procedural mistakes and penalties that they had plagued them really the first 6 weeks of the season, and they continue to lose, then yes, naturally you have to ask the question, should Frank Reich be the head coach going into 2024? I think it's a little bit too early right now. If we get to December and the Panthers have one win or they're still winless, then yeah, I think it really ramps up. And David Tepper, he's a man of pride. And you've seen in the past that when embarrassed, David Tepper decided, hey, we need to make some changes here. We can't allow this to happen moving forward. And you also have seen in the past David Tepper be an active participant with this organization. You go back to after his first year with Ron Rivera, when Rivera had to take over as a play caller for then defensive coordinator Eric Washington. David Tepper came out that January in 2019 saying that the best thing for the team moving forward was for Ron Rivera to call plays. So Frank Reich told us about a week ago that he had weekly meetings with David Tepper. You see fans on Twitter talking about Thomas Brown getting an opportunity to call plays. You see people out on social media that are the media saying the same thing. David Tepper at some point in time brought it up to Frank Reich over the last couple of weeks, being like, hey, are you sure it's not time to move the play calling over to Thomas Brown? So I don't think he's on a hot seat right now, but if it continues to go 0-6 the next 6 weeks, then yeah, they're going to have a problem and they may need to make a coaching change if that's the case. But I think he should be safe and we'll be back here in 2024.
All right, Reich safe, but you talk about Tepper's pride, and I'm really intrigued by this Houston game because David Tepper, an owner who, quote, doesn't sit idly by, is going to watch a lot of things play out on Sunday. I mean, is he going to see Texans fans take over his building as Julius Peppers and Moose Muhammad are honored? What is he going to see from his offense and his rookie quarterback against a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud that they could have picked, decided not to, and is performing very well? I mean, to me, this might have at least some implications for Frank Reich and everybody in the building if it goes horribly wrong as it has the first 6 games.
I would say it's wise that the Carolina Panthers are having Hall of Honor Day, not against the Cowboys or the Packers, based off of what we've seen the last couple of seasons as far as fan attendance. And I don't begrudge fans because David Tepper and his organization has not given them much reason to go spend their hard-earned money to go watch this team on a weekly basis lose. So I understand that. But as far as your question, right or wrong, it's going to be a referendum on the Carolina Panthers trading up to draft Bryce Young. There was a lot of talk from the media. Peter King is really the one who started the whole Frank Reich. He has a type as far as it goes to quarterbacks. They need to be this certain height. And you see Stephen Holder, who covers the Colts for ESPN.com, who knows Frank Reich well after his time there in Indianapolis, that he went up to Frank Reich during the owners' meetings back in the spring, being like, hey, I feel like I know who you want to take. You CJ Stroud fits everything that you want in a quarterback. Well, we just heard on Tuesday, Thomas Brown, who was hired before the Carolina Panthers even made the trade, saying that Bryce Young was number 1 on his board. And the league secret, at least the one that's not so secret, is that David Tepper was really fond of Bryce Young and that he played a role in Bryce Young being here because, of course, he's going to play a role. He's the owner. I think every owner should play somewhat of a role when making that big of a decision, but also let the people who you hired do their jobs, which David Tepper has had a hard time doing. But if CJ Stroud goes out there, throws for 300 yards, has 3 touchdowns, and Bryce Young, with Thomas Brown now calling plays, struggles, and the Texans win, it's going to be tough as far as the environment goes, with fans going to be wondering, as they already are, did we get the wrong guys? David Tepper going to then think, oh, man, we got to hire the wrong coach. Maybe I should have brought in D'Amico Ryans for an actual interview. And maybe things would have been different had he brought in Ryans and CJ Stroud. So it's going to be a referendum on Reich, on Tepper in a way, and on Bryce Young, whether it should be, because I do think it's way too early to have those kind of conversations. But in this 24/7, 365 news cycle, that's what we do.
Hey, speaking of news cycle, it's going to be humming in the next couple of weeks. The trade deadline expires right after that Texans game, just a few days later. What's kind of your threshold if you're the general manager for what you would trade Brian Burns for? And is what's best for GM Scott Fitterer necessarily what's best for this franchise? Because maybe he's feeling the pressure to go get that first round pick back and recoup that asset.
Yeah, it's interesting. David Tepper clearly signed off on the Carolina Panthers giving up their first round pick next year, giving up DJ Moore and all the compensation that went to getting up to get Bryce Young. So I don't think Scott Fitterer should be hung out to dry for that decision. And there's plenty of decisions that have been made the last couple of seasons that I don't think are 100% on Scott Fitterer. And that's not to sit here and absolve him of blame, because certainly he has played a part in this collaborative process that has led the Carolina Panthers to an 0-6 start in multiple missed draft picks over the last couple of seasons. But as far as Burns goes, they're not going to get the compensation that they would have got a year ago, reportedly from the Rams, who would have given them a first round pick in 2024 and in 2025, and also a third round pick. They possibly could get a first round pick. I just think it's difficult knowing that Brian Burns is playing on his 5th-year option. That's going to be a decent cap that a team has to pick up in the middle of the year. The fact that they could just be renting him as he still has not signed a long-term deal, that kind of complicates things and likely makes it to where the Carolina Panthers at best can get a first round pick or something akin to a first round pick. If I'm Scott Fitterer, I'm not trading Burns without getting a first round pick, just knowing that is a sticking point that the Carolina Panthers, it would be nice to be in the first round. Now, will that solve all of their problems? No, they failed a lot when it comes to day 2 and day 3 picks. I think that's really the biggest problem for the team right now as far as the draft goes, more so than not having a first round pick. But for me, if Burns is going to leave town, I'm going to need a first round pick plus a day 2 pick, like a second or a third round pick.
Who else on this roster would you be comfortable with trading? I mean, because, you like you said, you can get all the picks you want. You got to hit on those guys, and you've got some decent players that could be used as trade bait. But, how many and who would you be comfortable parting with?
Well, you always like to part ways with guys who are on expiring deals. And Xavier Woods is someone I think they can get out of a deal after this year, but he's been injured. So I don't think that is going to be something the Carolina Panthers can go down that road. You look at Jeremy Chin, who has seen his snaps reduced. The news came out on Wednesday that he is going to miss up to 6 weeks with a quad injury. So he's somebody that would have made sense. And I believe there probably would have been a market for him that the Carolina Panthers can't part ways with. Dante Jackson, he's someone I would look to try and trade. Maybe he can help a contender as a third corner. He's kind of struggled this year coming off of that Achilles injury, but he's a veteran. He's still a fairly young player. I think a team could use. Terrace Marshall, he came out on Thursday and he says that he's been given permission to seek a trade, a former second-round pick. Maybe that could yield something like an early day 3 pick for the Carolina Panthers. That would make sense, especially looking at his role. And is it possible that a guy like Hayden Hurst, who has not really been utilized, maybe that makes sense? Maybe Tommy Trimble, outside of Derek Brown, and I think, and I guess Ike Ekwonu as well, and of course Bryce Young. I'm pretty open, and Adam Thielen could make sense. Right. I don't know if you would want to do that. I'm pretty open. Aside,
you want Bryce Young to develop. I think you got to keep Thielen at this point.
Yeah. But as far as just like, hey, you want to get compensation, like that's a guy I think a team actually would be interested in. But really, you want to keep Thielen for Bryce's sake because that's the only guy you trust at this point in time. You're not going to trade Bryce Young. You're not going to trade Ike Ekwonu. You're not going to trade Derek Brown. Aside from that, I'd be open to pretty much parting ways with anybody. I mean, I don't want to trade Brian Burns, but I understand that that's going to be a conversation that will be had and probably needs to be had.
Julian Council's on our no trade list. And look, he's locked in his locked on box there at home. We'll let you out after the Texans game, Julian.
Okay, that works for me.
All right. Thanks, man.